Studying abroad in Australia was always something that I was extremely interested in. I was drawn in by its geographical location, the cities, and the fact that it was an English-speaking country. A lot of my friends went abroad to places in Europe, where the culture was so vastly different from that of the United States, especially difference in the language. Australia is a very westernized country, and although I assumed I would, for the most part, feel right at home, I found my fair share of cultural experiences specific to the land down under. One trip particular stands out in my mind. A few friends and I went for a weekend to the Outback of Australia and visited Alice Springs. Here we went to a few gorges to swim, and at one of them we stumbled upon a group of about 6 Aboriginal children playing in the water. To put some context to the situation, the relationship between Australians and Aboriginals has been a very long and complicated one that is still wrought with tension today. The groups have come a long way, and Australians have started to acknowledge Aboriginal lands and respect their cultural traditions. But even with these giant steps towards the future, there is nonetheless still a divide. Aboriginal culture centers within cities and towns all over Australia give you a peek inside their lives, traditions, and histories. It was very interesting to learn about, because the timeline of events of Aboriginals and Australian settlement was strikingly similar to that of the Native Americans and British colonization. They were forced out of their lands just like the Native Americans were during the Trail of Tears. It was somber learning about their hardships, and while there are important events to acknowledge, I didn't get the sense of joy and happiness of life that the Aboriginal people have until I was in the Outback. The Outback has lands relatively untouched by modern Australia, and these places, like near Alice Springs, show the true and natural environment of their culture. The children were running through the water, playing with each other, and shouting in their unique language. One of the little girls came over to me in the water, and we talked about all the things in the gorge, the tadpoles, the fish, the larvae, etc. She had a very vast imagination, as kids around her age do, and created an elaborate story about what kind of animals would be born from the little larva eggs. I asked her what language she spoke with her friends and siblings that she was playing with, and she explained to me that it wasn't a new language, but more so many types put together. I later looked up what language it was and learned that it was a version of English with so many slang terms and such a thick accent that though it sounded like a new language altogether, it was technically still considered English. It was a very prominent experience for me to be able to learn about the Aboriginal history in the culture centers, and then to experience it firsthand in the Outback. I realized that even though Aboriginal culture isn't the first thing you hear or think about when you talk about Australia, it is such an important piece of Australia's culture as a whole. Getting to have a first-hand experience with that part of Australia let me get a completed picture of the country as a whole.